So now directly from LAX and Sacramento, please join me, and you guys all give them a big hand, our assembly member from the 66th Assembly District, Muratsuchi. And I had this long introduction planned, but I think I've been vamping for long enough that I'm just going to let him introduce himself and so on. But I did tell him the story about the only race that matters. So
Okay.
you're the only race that matters.
Well, I'm here to talk about the only race that matters in this community is to elect Jimmy Gow to the Torrance City Council and to get a Democratic majority in the Torrance City Council.
That's our Pat Berry, Tim Goodrich, Kurt Wiedemann, and
Jimmy
Gow.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you for that.
Oh,
it's
of course.
time that you returned that favor.
I've been waiting for 6 years to use that line.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No. You know, I mean, no, seriously though, I mean, Torrance, as we all know, is the biggest city in the South Bay by far. You know, in my district, which goes from Manhattan Beach down through Palos Verdes, from the beach out to the 110 freeway, Torrance, with a population of almost 150,000 people, is more than twice the size of the second largest city in my district, which is Redondo Beach, at less than 70,000. So Torrance is almost a third of my assembly district, and you know, it's so frustrating for me representing a purple district like the South Bay to have Torrance, you know, going back and forth, and so, you know, in order for me to be able to do, you know, the work of the Democratic Party, of all of you, you know, we need a strong Democratic majority on the Torrance City Council, and this man, along with, you know,
Kurt Wiedemann, Tim Goodrich,
is going to help that cause. So I'm
Well, I already told them how a vote for Al is also a Democratic vote for Pat, Kurt, Tim, and Jimmy.
There we go.
And it turned out enough votes to elect Al Muratsuchi.
There we go.
And you're doing the same thing for Democrats, including Ben Allen and everyone else.
That's right.
Turn them out in Torrance. And
When Jimmy wins, everyone wins.
that's right. Or when Al wins, everyone wins.
Okay. So thank you very much for everyone for being here. I just came straight from Sacramento, and my flight unfortunately was delayed for more than an hour, but I'm glad that I was able to catch folks here before you were able to leave. So, is this the Trump Welcome to California committee here?
That's in Beverly Hills.
Or San Diego today, right? I was talking to my colleague from San Diego, Lorena Gonzalez-Fletcher, who represents San Diego, and she was telling me that she was flying home tonight because, you know, they're planning a little welcoming committee for Trump down in San Diego. So, needless to say, you know, I think, especially in the past 2 weeks, we've seen the importance of California and the importance of California's leadership in the fight for democratic values. We are leading the fight against Trump and his divisive, his divisive message. I think all of us have been seeing how California has been the big, you know, as our chairman of the state party, Eric Bauman, has been saying, the big blue beacon of hope. Not just for Californians, but throughout the country. And you know, to have Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump attacking California, I think has been a clear example that I think we're doing something right here. So
To actually come here, Jeff Sessions to actually come
yeah,
here.
yeah. You know, so he was up in Sacramento last week, and you know, attacking California for being pro-immigrant and for you know, all the great things we're doing in California. But I'm going to be talking on the campaign trail this year about how California has been a great example for the rest of the country in terms of getting things done. doing it the right way. California, as all of us know, we are now the 6th largest economy in the world. We're bigger than France. We have been leading almost all of the states in the country in terms of GDP growth. Just a couple of days ago, the LA Times reported that California now has a record low in terms of the unemployment rate at 4.4%. And we're doing all of this, while leading the country and in the world in many ways in terms of growing the economy and creating jobs, while at the same time leading the fight for clean energy and leading the fight against climate change. And so that is another direct challenge to Donald Trump and his his message of fighting for more coal and more for all the polluting, and oil off of our coasts and so forth. Another thing that I like to talk about California, that's just like objective evidence of how far we've come, is that just 7 years ago, in 2011 and 2012, California was facing a over $26 billion deficit. People were just 7 years ago talking about how California is falling off the cliff and that we've become ungovernable. But now we're looking at a budget, a rainy day fund of over $13 billion. And those are just the facts. Donald Trump can talk about false facts and all, but those are the verifiable facts. How far California has come in that turnaround, growing the economy, creating jobs, while at the same time establishing that fiscal stability, that fiscal responsibility. I think there's so much that we have to be proud of in California, and I'm so proud to be able to be a Californian and to be able to represent the South Bay in the California State Legislature. Some of the things I've been working on, and I'd be happy to open up for any questions so we can have more of a discussion. As Roger indicated, I'm leading one of the fights against Donald Trump in the fight against his proposal to reopen offshore oil drilling off of California's coast. And so I've introduced a bill that is to fight back against that proposal, to continue the over 30 years of a bipartisan consensus in opposing offshore oil drilling, so that we can protect our beautiful coast and our marine life and our environment. Our most precious asset, California's coast and our beaches and our ocean. Another bill that I've introduced, as many know. Hi, Carol. How are you? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. As many of you know, Carol Bauer was my the Assembly District's Woman of the Year for last year, and
I told her she gets to wear the crown until you get a new Woman of the Year.
Yeah, which actually was today.
Oh, was it today? Oh, Carol, you lost your crown, my dear, but you're always
But you're
our
always
woman.
going to be our woman.
Our
of the year.
Woman of the Year.
Well, I have to show up for you always.
Thank you for staying good.
Excuse me for
Okay.
having to leave.
Okay.
Thank
Are
you,
gonna be
Carol,
okay?
for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I want to make sure everyone knows Cody Bridges from my Torrance District Office. Torrance, Cody's always here. And I know Cody will be coming back.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
After he takes care of Carol. Another bill I've been working on, as many of you know, there is a Me Too movement that is long overdue to fight back against all the endemic sexual harassment that's been happening in all corners of society and all levels of our country. And I want to make sure that the Me Too movement protects women, among the most vulnerable women in the workplace, our hotel housekeepers. Many of our hotel housekeepers are working class immigrants, Latino, Asian, others working in California, predominantly women, often working in situations where they are vulnerable to sexual harassment, working alone in hotel rooms, often with male guests. And surveys have shown that almost half of all hotel housekeepers have experienced some type of sexual harassment. And we want to make sure that, again, the Me Too movement extends to protect among our most vulnerable women. So I've introduced a bill I'm working on with the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union, Unite Here, to provide all, to require all hotel employers to provide panic buttons so that they can get quick access to help in case they find themselves in situations where they're being harassed or being assaulted. We also are proposing basically a bad actors list of requiring hotels to keep a list of bad guests, guests that have been found with credible, substantial evidence of sexual harassment and sexual assault, so that employees can know and be forewarned of any problem guests checking into their hotels. I have another bill that's being sponsored by the leading education organizations in our state, a bill to increase our state funding for our K-12 schools. For too long, California has been, between 44th and 46th in the nation in per pupil spending. I have a bill to work toward California getting to at least the national average in per pupil spending, so that we can provide more funding for our schools and reduce our class sizes at all levels. So those are some of the things that I've been working on. I got plenty of other things that I've been working on. One of my main projects is to take some of the new transportation funding that we have available now to extend the Metro Green Line from North Redondo down into Torrance. The mayor and I, we've been talking about a new Torrance Transit Center at the corner of Crenshaw and Delama Boulevard, just south of the Torrance Refinery, to extend the Metro Green Line to Torrance, so that we can, have more public transit in the South Bay and get cars off the 405, off the 110, and off of our local roads, and more onto public transportation. Fight back against traffic, decrease pollution, and increase public transportation for the South Bay. Last but not least, I've been working hard to make the Torrance refinery safer, and all refineries in the state of California safer. I introduced a package of bills last year all designed to make California refineries safer. 3 out of 4 of my bills I got signed into law. One bill is to create a permanent interagency task force on refinery safety, so that we have our statewide offices, like the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, to coordinate their efforts with local first responders, like the Torrance Fire Department, who is in charge of our local first responder response in terms of in case of any emergency that happens at the Torrance Refinery. Another bill that requires the Torrance Refinery and all of the refineries to install air quality monitors around the perimeter of the refinery, so that when we see the latest incidents of flaring taking place at the refinery, or when we see these ongoing reports of excessive toxic chemicals and other pollutants being emitted from all the flaring that's taking place at the Torrance Refinery, that we at least have the data to be able to work toward the next step, which is to make sure that we crack down on their excessive pollution. Last but not least, the third bill that was signed into law is a bill that requires all refineries to again, work with all of your local first responders to establish effective community alert systems. One of the problems that we saw coming out of the February 2015 explosion at the Torrance Refinery was that the alarm for after the explosion, it took between 30 to 45 minutes to people to find out what happened. If there was a catastrophe that the U.S. Chemical Safety Board called Almost Happened at the Torrance Refinery, that we would at least want to get more prompt and more effective notice to all of the Torrance residents, as well as residents throughout the South Bay. Whether there's a leak of toxic chemicals or anything else that people should be looking out for. And so that's the third bill that was signed into law. The fourth bill that I introduced was a bill to ban hydrofluoric acid at the Torrance refinery. Right now there's only 2 refineries in the entire state of California that use this toxic chemical as part of their refining process. That bill, unfortunately, has been opposed by some very powerful special interests in Sacramento, and it's been held in committee. But I think we have a unprecedented opportunity to make the Torrance refinery safer and to address this issue of the hydrofluoric acid at the Torrance refinery through the current process that the South Coast Air Quality Management District is engaged in. I've always said from the get-go that I want to balance the goals of making the refinery safer by eliminating this hydrofluoric acid, while at the same time not threatening the over 1,000 jobs at the Torrance refinery, because those are good middle-class union jobs at that Torrance refinery, and I don't want to jeopardize those jobs. And I believe that the AQMD is in the best position to be able to address and to make that balancing act between making the Torrance refinery safer by addressing the hydrofluoric acid, while at the same time not threatening those good union jobs at the Torrance refinery. So. And I just ran through some of the things that I've been working on, but I'd be happy to answer any questions from anyone that may have any questions for me. Yes, sir.
Bail bond reform.
Yes.
What is there anything that's happening in the state about bail bond reform?
Yes. So there is a bill that is authored for the Senate side. Let me first say that I support bail reform in principle. I just want to make sure that we can make the principle work in reality without compromising public safety. There was a bill that, a companion bill, basically an identical bill that was introduced on the Assembly side last year. And last year I felt that it was premature to take up the bill because it was before the Chief Justice and her working group of judges were studying how to achieve bail reform. That report and the efforts of this working group of judges who are on the front lines of administering our bail system, they had not yet come out with a report. Since then, in October of last year, they finally issued the report. The report does recommend bail reform. And so, largely on the basis of the findings of that report, I will be supporting some effort to establish bail reform while making sure that we don't compromise public safety. Yes, sir.
As a member of TRAA, we were all very disappointed that AB 1645 didn't get out of committee. Can you talk a little bit about who were the special interests that killed that bill in committee? And I understand the union was one of them. How do we reach out to the unions to convince them that they don't need to be afraid of their jobs?
Yeah, so that's been a big challenge. I mean, I'm used to fighting against the big oil companies because I've always fought against them. Whether it's this offshore oil drilling bill that I've introduced or efforts in the past supporting a ban on fracking. I mean, I've always stood on the side of the environment and against the oil companies, and so I can deal with the oil companies with big oil's opposition. But the problem with my bill was that when you combine the opposition of big oil with the labor unions that represent the workers at the refinery, that became an insurmountable opposition, because the big oil has got the Republicans, and the labor unions make it difficult for the Democrats to support that bill. So I've tried for the last year and a half to try to convince the labor unions that represent the workers at the refinery that we should be able to achieve a win-win situation by requiring that, I was proposing that we require any retrofitting of the refinery from the hydrofluoric acid system to a safer alternative to require union jobs through a project labor agreement. But for some reason that I haven't quite figured out, the labor unions have not been buying that argument. And they seem to be convinced that any ban of hydrofluoric acid would result in the Torrance refinery shutting down, and they're losing hundreds of jobs at the Torrance refinery. So, I think TRAA, and I've been, in constant communication with the leadership of TRAA, that I do believe that the AQMD at this point is our best option to be able to achieve that balancing act. In particular, we need to make sure that the AQMD engages with their industry consultants, so that those that have the expertise in the refining business, so that we can address, we can separate fact from fiction. We can look at what is the truth in terms of being able to achieve a safer alternative to hydrofluoric acid, while at the same time protecting those good union jobs at the refinery and getting a win-win situation. I'm open to ideas. Again, I've been working on this for the last year and a half, and some of you were probably at the AQMD hearing a couple of weeks ago, where the unions were picketing against me, and it's been a tough fight, because as a Democrat, I've always felt that it was important for me to stand up for working people, I'm the last to want. I've been saying for the last year and a half, I'm the last that would want to see good union jobs being lost at that Torrance refinery. That's been a big challenge.
It's interesting when you talk to them individually,
Yeah.
and you talk to them about the possibility of a retrofit without shutting down, and that would indeed be more jobs. They actually kind of can come along, but it's coming from not the individual workers.
Not for the rank and file.
Not for the
Yeah.
rank and file.
So.
Are the other refineries not employing union workers?
They are.
So why would retrofitting change the workers that are being
Well,
hired to work at the refinery?
The argument that I've heard is that the cost of retrofitting the Torrance refinery would exceed basically, if not what they paid to purchase the refinery, it would exceed what they're willing to pay for to continue to operate the refinery. Now, whether that's a scare tactic or not is the question that I believe the AQMD should be able to answer.
It doesn't seem like anyone's going to let the refinery, what are they going to do, just let it sit there and be done? That'll never happen. I don't understand how people can't see that would never happen. The
Okay.
city would let that happen, and nobody's going to make that kind of investment and then just let it go.
Well, so it depends on, part of the challenge is figuring out how much it would cost to retrofit the refinery to make a conversion from hydrofluoric acid to an alternative. Most refineries in the state of California their alternative is the use of another chemical called sulfuric acid, which has its own problems, but it's not as dangerous as hydrofluoric acid. But according to the AQMD, they came up with a cost estimate of around $100 million to make that conversion from hydrofluoric acid to sulfuric acid. The Torrance refinery and the labor unions have been saying that it'll cost at least $500 million to make that conversion. So it's that cost estimate that's part of the challenge. But I think, again, that's where the AQMD has industry consultants, experts in the field that they are consulting with as part of the ongoing process that the legislature doesn't have. And I believe the AQMD, we should focus our efforts on the AQMD in order to try to
So that's our next step.
yeah,
The focus on the AQMD.
exactly.
Anyone else?
What about the Sessions lawsuit for the sanctuary cities? Is that
Yes.
what they're gonna go through?
So, I think the Sessions lawsuit has been met with a lot of heated political rhetoric on both sides. But in terms of the legal merits of the challenge, from what I've seen and heard so far, it'll be a while before. I mean, they're saying that this lawsuit may go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that it may be a matter of a year or two before we can actually get to the merits of the lawsuit. But I think the bottom line is that though that lawsuit is as good an example as any of California really fighting back against Trump's divisive rhetoric and divisive strategy of basically painting immigrants as scapegoats for all of our country's ills. There are differences of opinions as to some of those bills, but I think the bottom line is that California is standing up for immigrant rights and against a lot of the divisive rhetoric, and that's at the core of the lawsuit. Yes, sir.
So anything happening in the gun control area?
Thank you for raising that. So that's another bill that I'm working on. I mean, I think the bottom line in terms of California is concerned is, as many of you may know, California already has among the most progressive, the strongest common sense gun safety laws in the country. We've already, banned the sale of assault weapons since 1989, I believe is the date. And ever since then, we've been at the forefront of many of the strongest gun safety laws in the country. And you can verify that. I was looking for bill ideas last fall in the area of gun control, and I checked the Brady campaign, and they have a scorecard of different states in the country, and California, already is ranked among the strongest in the country in terms of common sense gun control laws. The problem, as we all know, is Congress, where we can't even get common sense gun safety laws like assault weapon bans or universal background checks, with the NRA controlling, especially the Republicans in Congress. This is a good segue into my own re-election campaign this year, but my opponent, the former mayor of Torrance, if you look, the last time I checked on his website, one of his 3-point platform, one of his main planks is supporting and defending people's Second Amendment rights, which as I think many of us recognize as code for being against common sense gun control, gun safety laws. I'm working on a bill right now with, which is actually a reintroduction of a bill that Governor Brown had previously vetoed, but it's a bill to allow for school employees, employers, co-workers to apply for gun restraining orders. You know, I think the recent Parkland shooting situation, we heard many of the students saying that they knew, you know, as soon as they heard that there was a former student who was the culprit in the school shooting, they knew who it was. They you know, oftentimes it's people at your schools or your coworkers or your employers that know, you know, who is most at risk and who should not have access to dangerous weapons. And so in this case, we're proposing what I believe is a very common sense proposal, which is that you know, we provide due process, you know, where school employees and others can petition a court, you know, with evidence supported by declarations under the penalty of perjury to say that so-and-so should not have any weapons because of their situation, whether it's mental illness or otherwise, and to seek a court order to take guns away from people that should not have access to guns.
Didn't Trump say in his infamous meeting, well, take the guns first and then do the due process? He said it to Mike Pence, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Take the guns first and then do the due process? You missed that one?
I missed that one.
It was glorious, Dianne Feinstein.
Oh, that was the one where she was getting all giddy about it.
Because he's literally telling Mike Pence,
Yeah.
well, I agree, Mike, but let's do the taking of the guns first, and then we'll do the due process. It was glorious.
Yeah.
Well, on top of that, the day that he proposed, President Trump proposed giving teachers guns,
That's right.
a teacher in Florida shot herself. She had a CCW and shot herself
Yeah.
in class,
Yeah.
Going to the bathroom?
accidentally.
Yeah. So, you know, I think, right after the Parkland shooting, I had someone standing in the southwest line, you know, next to me, and, you know, when he found out that myself and you know, two others that I was with were state legislators, what are you guys going to do about gun control? And you know, we were basically trying to tell them that you know, look, we're with you. You know, but the real challenge, the real problem is with Congress. You know, California has already passed among the most the strictest gun control laws. But you know, his frustration is, well, why do we have so many guns? You know, period. And I think. Obviously, I didn't have any easy answers for him. I think so. The real challenge, which the high school students from Parkland, Florida, are really leading the charge on, and hopefully, you know, we've had a change in the momentum in the national debate over gun control. But you know, we really need to have a culture change. We really need to you know, say that, okay, you know, law-abiding citizens may have a right to you know, own a gun, but you know, not every right you know, is unrestricted. You know, I mean, people may have a right to drive a car, but you don't have a right to drive a truck or drive a tank. You know, on our streets and our freeways.
About
You know?
a week or two ago, I heard on the news that the national regulations for states who have a right to carry and bear arms, like Texas, where they can carry their guns and wear them.
Yes.
And they were saying that those people, if they have that in their state, they can go to any other state in the nation with that gun and they can carry it like they would in Texas. Have we got any way in California to protect ourselves against them, to override that law?
I know that There's been discussions about that, and to be perfectly honest, I don't want to give you any false information. It's my understanding that there was a proposal to allow that, but that is not yet law, and that would apply to California.
It's called the reciprocity, it's
Okay.
somewhere in the title of it.
Okay.
And what I heard was that 40 senators were in support of it, so there was a call to action to be aware of this,
To oppose that.
to oppose that.
Yeah.
It's like, they got 40.
Okay, so there is strong support for it, but it is not yet law.
Right.
But
Immediately
there's
trigger.
nothing we can do here.
Because
If
that's
If that would be passed as a national law, we have to accept it? And-
Well,
Our Attorney General would immediately.
except, I'm thinking, I would have to study the issue to make sure I have all the facts straight, but I believe that may involve what's called interstate commerce, which may be in the domain of federal law that would basically take precedence over state law. So there's a general principle in law that where we're dealing with situations that involve multiple states, like the transporting of guns across state borders, then federal law would take precedence over state law, and that may prevent the state from being able to restrict that.
Yeah.
Although I was just thinking, the idea is you could let them bring their guns, but then they have to enroll in the California militia. I think everyone.
That's one idea. That's right.
Another suggestion, which was
Second.
require the gun owners to have liability insurance.
Yes, so that's another approach. I think there are all kinds of creative ideas that we can explore. One of the ideas that I was exploring was to try to, it's a strategy that others have considered, but it's to try to address gun safety as a public health issue, where you can hold, just like we held tobacco companies liable for the deaths caused by cigarettes and their false advertising about cigarette smoking for years, that if we held gun manufacturers liable.
One here get a yard sign for re-electing Al Muratsuchi for assembly. How would that work?
See, thank you getting up there.
So everyone here could go home with an Al Muratsuchi for assembly yard sign.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so that was my first question. The second thing is, and don't feel put on the spot, but you are, but that I would love you, schedule permitting, to be a guest of honor at the campaign kickoff
Okay.
here on Friday,
Scheduled on
March
Friday night,
20th.
yes.
So if you can make it, I'd love to have you be here.
Okay,
So,
I will definitely, try to be there.
all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay,
And
can I just make a quick talk about the campaign?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So as many of you may know, this is I'm running in a purple district that I won in 2012, I lost in 2014, and I regained in 2016. This time around, I have a new opponent. He may be familiar to many of you. He's the former mayor of Torrance, Frank Scotto. I think those of you that know Frank Scotto, would agree that he is a bona fide Trump Republican, but he, as a former mayor of Torrance, he has a high level of name recognition, especially in the largest city in my state assembly district. And so I am in for my fourth top election in 6 years. I want to continue to fight for the South Bay and fight for democratic values in the South Bay. I really need your support. I really need your help in order to be able to continue to serve you. And so I really appreciate your help.
Well, let's see, and I think we've already kind of hooked this up. Traditionally, this club has made our run-ups to elections, June and November,
Okay.
coincide with showing up at your campaign office and doing get out the vote. Last month, we talked about it and we decided to push our June and Novembers up so that it essentially is the day before the election in June and November. And so we decided we're all gonna be available to get out the vote for Al on the day before the election. And with your permission, what we'd love to do is people walking in Torrance would also drop a slate for Pat Fury for mayor, Kurt Wiedemann, Tim Goodrich, and Jimmy Gao for Torrance City Council.
Yes.
So, so you could do, because one of the most frustrating things is if you're walking precincts and stuff, and I once had an experience of a good friend of ours from one of the other clubs, and president of one of the other, and he was walking for one candidate, and I was walking for you, but we literally were going door to door, kind of matching it to the, it's really too bad that we can't get this together a little bit more to kind of sync up, you know, and doing it. So I would love to have Torrance walkers for Al also be dropping for our slate of the 4 Democrats that are going to flip the tide from red to blue on the city council.
Sounds good.
All right, perfect.
All right. So, may I officially request the endorsement of the Torrance Democratic Club?
You know you have it,
Oh,
but
okay.
we can
All
do
right.
it again
Okay,
for fun. Unanimous consent to endorse Al Muratsuchi without objection. So ordered. So once again, you already had it, but you can continue to have our endorsement. So yes,
Thank you.
yes, of course.
I'm honored.
We've done that. So
Okay,
very
all right.
good.
Done that.
You get a chance.
You know, I just gotta get a pie and go.
Okay, very good.
Smart.
Thank you,
very much.
everyone. Next month, Mayor Fury as our guest.
All right. Ride the big blue wave.
Oh, yes.